Access to water resources in rural communities in northern Ghana is severely under threat due to a lack of adequate water services infrastructure, unpredictable rainfall, and a general lack of awareness of the reality of the imminent climate crisis.
Climate crisis, I believe, is water crisis. Climate change is affecting water resources, and water is also affecting sanitation, and sanitation is also affecting hygiene, and that's why we are worried.
There is a fear that in some years coming, Ghana might be short of water based on climate projections that have been made.
For us in developing countries, the challenge that we are facing is the impact that is creating on our development.
We, as developing countries, one, have infrastructures that are weak. Secondly, our economies depend on agriculture. And finally, the capacity of the people to also adapt to the impact is also very weak.
According to WaterAid, the climate crisis is a water crisis that has profound effects on the quality of life of those who live in rural communities.
As water and climate change, when it happens, it affects everything. It can even affect the infrastructure we have delivered. For instance, we depend on groundwater to provide water services to our community. If the levels are dropping, if they are drying up, it means that you may have this huge investment of infrastructure beds, what to power it, which is the water, is not there. So we think leaving climate change out will eventually derail every gain that we have made.
Or we sensitize communities to construct latrines. Year in, year out, these latrines collapse due to torrential rains and prolonged period of flooding. And so people move away from practicing open defecation in the dry season, only for them to return to defecating in the open in the rainy season because the latrines they have constructed have all collapsed. And that is why WaterAid is so much concerned.
With a long dry season, communities in northern Ghana are prone to drought, and access to water for sanitation and hygiene activities is a rare commodity.
This well has been here since 2010 till date, and it has been giving us water since 2010. Then from the beginning of 2021, the water dried up. So from then till now, we've not had water from it.
We don't get rains often. Just like the garden like this, I will plant some things for some time and then suddenly the rains will stop and everything will die.
From November up to today, how many months? November, December, January, February. We are now in March, 5th month. There's no drop of water from the air, from the atmosphere to the ground in Upper East. And moreover, by this time, almost all the surface water, the streams and the dams have dried up. So if we don't put in technical measures to find water on the ground for people to use, it becomes disastrous.
We pump the water into these two overhead tanks for distribution to the population. As a result of the changes in weather, our ability to pump water to fill these tanks has started dropping because the water table is now going down. That means that our ability to also serve the water out to the consumers is reduced.
With climate change and weather variability becoming more pronounced, its impacts are becoming more pervasive in local communities.
It's affecting farmers. It becomes very difficult to know when to even plant crops. And it's affecting food security.
Basically, this is a farmer thing. We try to come together to see whether we drill our own borehole to be able to, do our own dry season farming. But the challenge we are facing here is because the water table is gone down, and pepper needs a lot of water So because of that, we are not able to, irrigate our farming well. So you can see that we have to approve certain areas because the water is not there. And that is what we also depend on.
Balma tuma kwa ba kala ne kwa mala ba kala ita wana tuwan ma ko ngani kala me de ga kala te tuma yuma la nore akuli ka nore tuma kwa de akwada ko ga bato te le tala ko ana pompur mala ba en ka en na ka ngela ga ba en sala ba da te de makati ko le ga ba ka po dunga.
You know, a lot of people don't see the impact of climate change, but a lot of research work has been done that actually tell the story of how Ghana is suffering from the impacts of climate change. These stories won't be told until we consciously get in touch to those behind those stories and then project them in the public domain. And one way of projecting them is to advocate with evidence. You know, you show the evidence, you showcase the evidence, help people to see it and help people to understand.
A lack of awareness and understanding of the nature of the challenge at hand means that people are incapable of exploring solutions. As part of their coping mechanisms, people may sometimes venture into activities such as sun winning and logging for firewood to augment their incomes. However, these only exacerbate the impact of the climate crisis.
This was not how the environment used to be. It was very beautiful. At first, the soils were good, where they would go to farm, and the yield was somehow good. But due to changing nature of the environment coupled with bad soils, the harvests are no more good. And we have also increased in numbers. The farming that we used to do, people are still doing it, but the returns are very low. And because of nothing doing probably during dry season, that is why people have engaged in sun winning at this particular community. If this act is not stopped, you can see our environment will continue to be bare and bare.
We are therefore seriously working with communities and partners to embark on this advocacy drive to ensure that government and other key stakeholders take a keen interest in climate change and adaptation measures in order to secure our future.
Most NGOs are now moving from what we call the intervention. They used to provide boreholes for communities. Most of them now are moving gradually to what we call advocacy. WaterAid want to do this, and you see, you cannot just do this without evidence-based research. And therefore, they commissioned a team, which I led that team. So we look at 4 districts. 1 district in the Upper West region, that is Boa, and then the other 3 regions are the Upper East region. So we have Kasana-Nankana West District, we have Bongo District, we have Boku West District. So we wanted to look at the level of understanding of the people about climate change. Are they even aware about climate change? We wanted to find out that. The second issue is that we wanted to know how climate change is impacting on water. And then the third aspect, to see what can WaterAid do, to support the effort of government.
WaterAid's agenda, water and climate change advocacy agenda, is to generate some evidence from the field and use it to advocate for government to prioritize water, sanitary hygiene in all climate change plans, strategies, and policies. But we are seeing that in all these plans, the drinking water, particularly, and other aspects of WASH, it's prioritized in this document.
When it comes to the capacity, when it comes to the ability to be able to withstand the impact of climate change, I think the developing countries, the poor countries, are more vulnerable than the advanced countries in adapting to the impact of climate change.
What the community is doing is to gather data so that they can use the data to advocate for change, to advocate for sufficient infrastructure. So they are able to demonstrate the relationship between rainfall and groundwater. And they are able to demonstrate that water security is not so much about rainfall, but it's about how we are able to make use of the rainwater that comes. We can harvest it and use it as and when we need. So with the data in hand, they are able to advocate for expanded water infrastructure.
It is important that as part of government effort to drive the change process, these processes are directed to the ground where people actually own them. You know, the program should be owned by people living in their local places.
Rural communities are undoubtedly faced with a grim future if proactive efforts are not taken to protect them from current threats posed to water and sanitation access in these communities.
We need a serious improvement into the water and sanitation sector, and that will really have a rippling effect on our education, to have a rippling effect in our agriculture, to have a rippling effect in productivity in every aspect of the economy. And we need that very, very badly.
I would say government has taken the right step by acknowledging that climate change is happening in Ghana, and for which reason government has developed the necessary policies and strategies and plans. Government is committed to making available 22.2 billion USD to address emission issues and other climate-related issues. This is fine, but I cannot tell how much they've been able to mobilize up to this time. But we are saying that government should invite all like-minded organizations to the climate change table, or the round table, so that we can all see what role each organization can play. Because sometimes this amount can be too much for government to mobilize.
There is an urgency that we need to educate people, the government needs to educate people, people need to understand that something is happening. It is here, and there is a real urgency for us to take action, especially in water resources.
The more we delay action, climate change, it will affect water, and it will affect communities, it will affect vulnerable groups, and it will affect the overall development of the country.
The fight against climate change should be seen from the angle of development. It should be seen from the angle of livelihood. It's the narrative that makes the difference.